Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
It's 11 minutes past 10 o'clock, and speaking of extraordinary, we've got a very special guest on the phone today. Now, Peter Holden is his name. Peter and I have been calling footy together on and off over the last 10 years or so, and it's a great pleasure to have Pete on the line. Pete, good morning to you.
Good morning to you both, but I'm not quite sure I am the real thing.
Yeah, you're more the unreal thing, aren't
Close
you?
enough today, Peter. You've got a very, very good bank of credits to support women's sport still doing it, and that's the reason Neil has got you to come on today to talk about what you're doing now. But let's go all the way back. Talk about Peter Holden, early days, radio, sports. How did it all start for you?
Oh, geez, now this is really going back.
Don't forget, it's Rob Cameron we're talking about. If you want to talk about going right back, he's your man.
Well, I might as well talk about community radio since I'm on 94.7 The Pulse. I actually originally started out in community radio when I was 15 years old at 98.9 Northwest FM up in Melbourne's northwestern suburbs. That's when I walked in, I did the radio presenter's course, and I said, can I do a little footy show? And used to do the Riddell District Football League, so we had a little play on words. We had Tell Me Riddell. I did that. It was a nice little thing to have on the resume. I got a job at... people know Dimmy's Forges. There was a store called Forges of Footscrape.
1999!
Exactly. And just by luck, the store manager, Stuart Doyle, happened to be a cycling commentator. And he goes, you've got a pretty good voice and you can hold the microphone. And he wrote me into doing cycling commentating at the Northcote Velodrome. It wasn't exactly a passion of mine, but, got to start somewhere. And from there, I thought, maybe I can do this radio thing a bit more. And after that, hit the road. I mean, I went down the road to Colac at what was then known as Otway FM, 5TCB Bordertown, up to 4BL Charleville, Queensland, twice. 4HI Emerald, throw in there a mix of 2BM Moree, 2ET Bega, Classic Rockatuka. And in between all of that, I... got homesick a lot and kept coming back to Melbourne a lot and squeezed in doing local footy calls. Originally as a 19-year-old with the Western Region Football League. Spent 2 years in Geelong doing what was the Ballerine Football League and then Geelong Football League. And since, I think, about 2007 doing the VFL, including, as Neil mentioned, quite a number of years alongside him at 3WBC.
Back the truck up, 5TCB Bordertown. How'd you get to be there?
5TCB Bordertown was a case of we were taking at Otway FM a program called The Rural Report out of 5TCB. They used to syndicate that and send it out in the CD, and then the station manager at one stage mentioned, our program manager for many years is moving on to a new job. Know anyone that might be interested? And I went, well, funny enough, my little contract's coming up here at Otway FM, and we ended up heading out that way to, which I always find funny, a place called Bordertown, but it's actually something like a 15, 20-minute drive away from the actual border. Yeah,
it always intrigued me. So I just lived at Keith for a while, and my radio journey started at 5TCB as well. So
haven't they got a lot to answer for?
They have got a lot to answer for, Peter. You and I have cursed the radio world ever since.
It was fun. I actually got to call a grand final there, the KNTFL grand final back in, if I'm correct in my mind, 2002. So, 21 years ago. Thanks for making me feel old.
Yeah, well, I've called 3 of a KNTFL grand finals over the journey, so we've got a lot in common. We should have a coffee one day.
Oh, indeed. And I tell you one thing, there's a bit of local rivalry in that town between Bordertown and Mundella. They hate each other.
They do indeed.
So the journey into the VFL, obviously, it's I guess a bit like a player, isn't it? That you work your way up through suburban and you get picked up on a VFL list. The calling of VFL games was pretty good fun. Obviously, you see some young fellas coming through that you thought, yeah, they're going to make it on the big stage.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of them just announced his retirement. That was Isaac Smith. And I had the privilege of calling him when he was playing VFL at North Ballarat. And I do remember him just burning up the grass at the Docklands Stadium back in 2010. I think it was 2010, 2009 or 2010. I think it was 2010. It was the third of the three grand finals in a row won by the North Ballarat Roosters. And that day we got roped into what was the 3WBC team. We got called for 3-day Ballarat. They asked us to call the grand final for them. And we called North Ballarat Roosters versus the Northern Bulldogs. And you just saw the speed that Isaac Smith was going at. This one's got it switched on. He knows his football, and it was no surprise that he got picked up by the Hawks and then eventually down at Geelong. And and then it just makes you think, wow, his career's gone for some 13, 14 years at AFL level, and now it's all over.
Now, there's another player who is a contemporary, and in fact, I think they might. Isaac Smith comes from Temora, doesn't he? I think up in New South Wales.
Yeah, somewhere in mid-New South Wales, yeah.
As does his good mate Luke Bruce. Now, tell us the story of how and why it is that Luke Bruce, whenever he gets near the ball, people go, roost. Where did that come from?
Well, what happened was the original story is it came from a game between Box Hill versus Frankston. This was 2009, I would say. And it was at Box Hill City Oval, boring game. I think Box Hill were blowing out Frankston that day, and we're trying to look to keep ourselves entertained during the call. And Bruce has got the ball in the back line, and I go, and it's gone out the back, and it's picked up by ELO. And my coach comes out of Ben Brady's got him and looks at me and go, ELO? I said, yeah, don't bring me down. Moment. Whenever he would pick up the ball, Ben then picked up on it the next time by going, and it goes up and it's picked up by don't bring me down. And then all of a sudden we started to do it in harmony every time. And we thought, there's this little funny thing between us. It won't go anywhere. Considering Luke's actual nickname amongst the boys was Punky Brewster.
Yep.
And we thought, this is just a little amusing thing between us until he played his first game at the MCG. And you could hear on the Channel 7 commentary the crowd in the background go, they're all thinking, are they all going boo? Something like that. And I'm thinking, oh no, I know exactly where they picked this up from.
I ran into Luke in Temora in January and made myself known, and he said, can you tell me, where did that Bruce thing come from? And I said, Peter Holden and Ben Brady, you might want to give them a call at some stage because he thinks it's a great laugh. I guess the one that sticks out to me, and I think you were sitting next to me on the day, was the 2013 grand final at Docklands Stadium. And when Christian Jacks, who went on to play for the Greater Western Sydney Giants and Carlton, took a mark at centre-half forward, and the siren would have gone. And the Oakley Chargers were 6 points behind. And Christian went back and kicked a goal, which meant it was a tie. Therefore, the game kept going. It was golden point. And the ball came out of the centre, and a young kid playing for the Oakley Chargers picked out his forward player with a pinpoint pass, which would ultimately result in a point, which meant that the Chargers won it. His name was Jackson McRae. And I remember saying that day, watch out for this kid. He is going to be a superstar. And I still think he's the Bulldogs' best player, ahead of the other bloke.
Yeah. I will pick up just quickly on that Luke Bruce story, just one moment, just to say that what did ruin it, though, was Box Hill did pick up a bloke called Cameron Bruce. Yes,
who these days is living in a northern city as an assistant coach.
Yeah, exactly, when the actual thing is don't bring me down, Bruce. But said about Jackson McRae and kids coming to the under-18, you think you're going to be big. I actually had the privilege in 2008 being on Docklands Stadium doing the MC for the VFL Men's Night Grand Final. It was between North Ballarat and Port Melbourne. And before that, the Murray Bushrangers were playing in the under-18s Grand Final. And this young bloke called Still Sidebottom came out and kicked a lazy 10 goals, playing as a midfielder, mind you, that day.
Yes.
You just go, just got to film this bloke body.
And interestingly, he didn't win the goal kicking that year. A chap who was his teammate was a kid called Tom Rockcliffe who did. Who obviously went on to play for the Lions and for the Power very, very successfully. So fast forward a little bit, Pete. Women's footy, bit of a joke in those days, back in the VWFL days. What's the yarn that got you involved in women's football?
It all came about by accident. Around 2012, 2013, I've been calling with 3WBC for a number of years, and also done some MC work for the Port Melbourne Football Club, doing their luncheons, etc. It felt like, the club media thing wasn't for me. It was more like, I enjoyed my calling. But with 3WBC, with respect to everyone on the team, I felt a bit bored calling just the one team each and every week. I wasn't a Hawk supporter. I was a Bomber supporter by nature. But also as a commentator, you got a bit restless. You'd rather call a bunch of teams throughout the season and see the whole league. And just by luck, phone call comes out of the blue. Anthony Stangett's former 3WBC
Morning, Gutsy.
AFL Victoria media manager, and he goes, "Oh, look, I've had a call from the VWFL. They've got a game on tomorrow night, and they don't have any commentators. It's a game they hold every year on the eve of Anzac Day. It's a game between, their all-stars. It's not their best team. It's those who don't play in their top division, and they get to play against the Australian Defence Force. But they need some commentators. Can you help out?" I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, no worries," and headed down to the ground, and I tried to do some research on the way to the ground by YouTube, going, "Look, is there any games I can find? Is there information I can soak in?" And I had a look, and I go, "Oh, look, that every week they're putting their game of the week on YouTube, but there's no commentary. It's just, you hear the sound of the crowd, and you see the camera move back and forward following the play." And I'm going, well, here's an opportunity maybe to do something and call their games. And after I did that one-off match, I thought, yeah, maybe I should ask about the next season, start afresh 2014, and asked them the question, and they went, "Oh, yes, AFL Victoria taking over." I thought, oh, great, there'll be more resources. There's no money. There's no money, and we're cutting the streaming. And I'm like, oh, okay, that ends that idea. But then, in May of 2014, a former Geelong resident, a St Joseph's boy, Daniel Hill, who had called previously in the VFL with in 2007, he said, he bumped into me after a Box Hill Hawks game, and he goes, "Oh, look, I've moved to Melbourne," and he goes, "Oh, interested in calling footy." And I said, "Well, 3WBC's got a lot of commentators at the moment. It'd be hard to get in." And then I looked at him going, "What are you reading about calling women's footy?" And from there, this little thing called Wharf Radio took off, and I went out with a few $100, brought some equipment, thanks to Phil Edwards at 3WBC, who gave me the old hand-me-down headphones, and we're away originally as a two-man show.
And it's Wharf has morphed, that you can use that if you ever want to, into excitingly not just calling VWFL as it was in those days. I only ever broadcast one VWFL, and I had Matthew Cox, who's now the SCN presenter, and Chloe Curtis, Shiloh. I always go Chloe because it looks like Chloe. Shiloh Curtis sitting next to me on the other side. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. They went on. Here I am still in Geelong. But AFLW football coming.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. After years of doing the VFLW, as we always say, we were proudly pre-AFLW era, the only ones to be calling women's footy before the AFLW existed, and doing it on a weekly basis. We had the opportunity last year when Season 7 happened around the middle of the year. We got asked after being knocked back for 7 years, going, "Oh, would you now like to call the AFLW?" And we said, "Oh, we'd love to, but we don't have the specific equipment that was needed to broadcast." Unlike a community football broadcast where you can just stream straight to the web, it's a little bit more complicated with AFL House. The particular equipment you need to talk to their equipment, it costs many thousands of dollars. So I couldn't get it done in time last year, and then this year I asked them the question, well, can we do it? And they said yes, and I decided to burn a hole in my wallet and go out and buy all the requisite equipment. And once I put the word out there to some of our former callers of, look, this thing we thought we were closing down, we're putting the band back together, we're going to do the AFLW, all of a sudden, every commentator and their son and daughter are coming out of the woodwork. We've grown from what was a two-man team in 2014 to sometimes being around maybe a dozen to, I think we've got about 30 to 35 commentators on our roster for this year.
Including a hack from Geelong, I'm pleased to say. So people, if they want to listen to the games when they are on, they'll be streaming through AFL, what do you call it, app? Is that where it'll be?
Yeah, exactly. So because of the broadcast rules in place, we're becoming what's called a AFLW complementary broadcaster. So obviously the likes of SEN, Triple M, ABC, 3AW, K-Rock, if they want to do it, that they are called rights holders. And at any stage, they are free to do whatever AFLW games they want to do if they want to do it. We stepped in with a bit of an understanding that for the games that aren't being covered because they've got other broadcast commitments or can't do it for logistical reasons, we will jump in and call those games, but that will be strictly, we can't syndicate on AM or FM radio. It has to be strictly via the AFL's website. So that also includes women's.afl and the AFL Women's app. So any of the AFL websites and apps that will actually carry our commentary from our volunteers.
Peter, there's a big story in town lately, I think, is going to be great for all women's sport, and that is the Matildas performance, the world stage here, women empowered to take on a traditional men's game and do it well. We've seen women's cricket in particular grow rapidly. You've watched the footy thing from the word go to now. How excited are you about the ability now for young women to step out onto a traditional male stage and have their chance to really shine and develop character? I think it's going to be powerful what the soccer has done to help all women's sport, including the AFL. What's your view on that?
I think we're actually coming to a critical point in the road when we look at women's sport and what administrators are doing, because we've got to remember, on the back of the Matilda's success as well, there's also on the AFLW side, there's still negotiating the CBA because they want to do a joint men's and women's CBA with the AFL and what will they be paid and how many games they will play, etc. I guess with the Matilda's success being fantastic, the only thing that's probably held it back a bit, and finally it will come out next week, is they'll have the W League fixture. I wish on the soccer side of things they actually had that fixture while the World Cup was going on, so they could promote, hey, go see Melbourne City, go see Western United, these dates, etc. But so hopefully they don't lose momentum from that, because we've seen it with the Socceroos on the men's side, how we have this great World Cup, but it hasn't turned into numbers at the domestic league level. So this is critical, but there are things in the right steps, such as I think the South Australian Premier announced that he was going to tip in $18 million in support to upgrading women's sporting facilities, which is, the step in the right direction. And obviously we know that, the AFL clubs that have got women's programs have been benefiting so far from money coming in, updating their grounds, and, of course, installing women's facilities in those venues. But again, why I mentioned the crucial point is we've seen how soccer well-funded, and this is probably an effect because of European clubs now pouring money into it, has seen the standard of this World Cup being absolutely fantastic. And need we say more about that Sam Kerr goal against England? Cricket has been fantastic to watch because money has been poured in over many years. As much as the Women's Big Bash League doesn't draw the numbers like the AFLW, it is drawing good TV ratings because people are saying, wow, this is really good quality cricket. The AFLW is in a bit of a predicament where, because the competition has expanded so quickly, as you expand naturally any competition, it does dilute the talent pool a little bit in the short term. And at the same time, because the AFL has rushed to 18 teams, you're in a situation where they're now like, oh, we don't really have much more money to spend. And the players at the same time are screaming out, well, we want to play more games because if we can play more games, we can improve, and we also want to go full-time so we can train more and we can get better. And the AFL saying, well, there's not that much money there, and the Aussie rules is coming at a bit of a critical moment. If we don't get this moment right, there could be a little chance, a little slither of a door open there for soccer to take that moment and run with it and take the attention of women in this country and young girls when they're deciding what sport they want to play.
Well, Pete, we're coming close to the end of our time. Interesting thoughts there. So, the two teams that are going to play in this year's AFLW Grand Final, in your opinion?
I hate to say it's a bit of the same old because it's always been the same clubs around the top of the table, but I find it hard to stop Melbourne Even though they've lost Daisy Pearce, I still believe they've got good enough draw to be at the top end.
Sorry, do they have other players? Sorry, last year I didn't know that there were any other players apart from her playing.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it is a bit like that, isn't it?
A lot like that, yep.
Melbourne will get to the grand final, but they will lose the grand final. To my opinion, the Adelaide Crows. The Crows do have a younger list. They just seem to get better every year, even after the loss of Erin Phillips. I think that the Crows will get there and beat Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval on grand final day.
And, of course, there are people who are listening who are probably more inclined to follow a team that has horizontal hoops on their jumper. Where do they finish? Do they make the 8?
I would say out of my top 8, I have got Geelong finishing 5th, winning the first week of finals, and then they get knocked off. I think, by my calculations, I think I have North Melbourne beating them in the second week of the finals. But I have Geelong making 5th, beating Essendon, who would finish 8th in the first week of the finals.
Well, the AFL could save a whole lot of money. Just talk to you. You've already got the results. We don't need to play the footy.
Geelong footy is going to be very, very exciting this year. It's they've got a great young bunch of players. Everyone loves watching Nina Morrison run around, Chloe Shear. The return of Erin Hoare as well.
Indeed.
She went after she had a kid, and then she went overseas for her work and studies, and she's back, so it'd be fantastic to see her in the ruck again. And finally, they have fixtured Geelong to play Melbourne. The two oldest clubs will meet for the first time in a women's match.
Sounds good. And, of course, we all love Kate Darby here because her parents and her grandma love listening to this program. Pete, thanks for taking time out of you. I know you've been working all night and you stuck around to talk to us, so thanks for doing that. And people want to know more. WARF Radio, WARF radio.com is the website.
Thank you very much, Neil and Rob. Thanks very much for your company.
Good on you, Peter. All the best.
Peter Holden there from WARF Radio and doing some amazingly good things for women's footy.